My Uncle Joe was a fantastic man. We lost him sadly last year. A great dad and a great husband, but also a very successful businessman.
I think that he realised very early on, and I would say ahead of the curve,
that the secret to a successful agriculture business was diversification. So I think with a degree of surety, thanks Trump for that one, that he was the first farmer to set up a farm park and farm shop, that kind of thing. Huge success.
And I've applied that to my career by being open-minded and seeing where opportunity lies in the kind of strangest, muddiest burrows of the music industry. So, for example, my first house I bought with the proceeds from a government information film. In fact, if I were to think of my kind of royalty pyramid, up at the top would be government information films, next would be library music, next would be factual entertainment, drama, and then feature films. So kind of the reverse hierarchy to how we kind of snobbishly perceive media music.
Which I hope kind of contextualises, if you've been watching this vlog, and thanks if you have, what I've been up to over the last 2 weeks.
And that is that I've been splaying myself amongst several different kind of areas of activity.
And each kind of aspect of what I do with my career feeds into the other. So I have a very supportive family, that's absolutely key. I have support from Spitfire Audio to keep going as a composer. But crucially, I also have the trust of the Inside Number 9 team, who know that in order to survive, we have to kind of keep our fingers in a few different pies. But they also know that come hell or high water, I will deliver the score on time every time. It's an amazing series. Not only is it kind of the darkest possible humour, it is also what's called an anthology series, which basically means it's different every single week. Different characters, genres,
a different era, which basically means I have to reset every week. Now, about 2 years ago, I stopped using enormous orchestral templates.
I felt myself reaching for the same tools, and when I reached for the same tools, I made the same shapes
over and over again. So the music started sounding the same. In fact, I was working on a science fiction movie, and the director said, is it me or does this sound like Poirot? Which was absolutely disastrous. So what I now do, and I made a pledge to myself, is to create a template for every single job that I do, which means for Inside Number 9, I'm having to make a different template every week. And when I build these templates, I try and make my workflows as different as possible and really reduce the instrument count down to as a smaller band as possible. I find that if I starve myself of resources, I become more resourceful compositionally. So instead of making a moment scary by pulling out my death scrape bowed cymbal sound, I actually write music that is scary, that makes you feel scared. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is by reducing my templates down to the utter minimum, I'm having to rely on compositional chops to establish the tone and feeling and emotion of the scene, not my sounds. So this week I'm really challenging myself by actually, you'll see that there's quite a high bar count. Basically, I'm going to do an entire episode as one cue. So there's a few little tips to that. Make the tempo really fast. It's great. You can quantize to eighths, which is always easier than sixteenths. But also, it basically means you don't have to do too many tempo changes to get the different in and out points. I want this to really completely flow, to feel like a band. And I think the only way I can achieve that is doing it as a single cue. So basically, I'm trying to make it quite chambery, so I've got a selection of Spitfire sounds, but what I'm actually doing is I'm using the close mics, and then I'm bussing them out of some Lexicon chamber, so quite a short reverb. So I've got Skylar's harp, which is beautiful, but I always layer it with our Labs mini harp because I find this cuts through. Always cuts through with dialogue. So you have the kind of majestic beauty of Skylar's harp alongside the slightly more biting mini harp, which I played. Selection of pianos, which I'll replace with my Schimmel, and things like wood blocks. And then, unusually for me, I'm using a lot of legatos, which I'm really enjoying. I think the bassoon is the best one we've ever made. So you'll see that I've coloured the different instrument groups, and each instrument group, so there's harps and pianos, are going into a dedicated bus. And they've also got a dedicated reverb sound, which if you go down here, you've got your different reverbs for your different instrument groups, which are then going into the buses. And I've got some direct outs so that you can hear it, but also some tracks set up with these different buses there. So basically the plan is, once I'm happy and kind of mixed, is I'll just hit record and record the whole thing down, and it'll be all stemmed up. When I was making this template, it reminded me of an experiment that Paul and I did a while back when proving the concept of the Spitfire idea of recording the rooms as well as the instruments. And to, I guess, silence the naysayers who say, well, why don't you just record it dry and then add a bit of reverb? It just does not sound the same. And it's actually produced a bit of a revelation, just going up the hill this morning, thinking about doing this little tutorial of how certain instruments you can get away with recording dry and adding reverb to, and other instruments you just can't get away with it at all. Now, I've just set up this little experiment here. So if I'm going to hit some tuba notes, it kind of sounds like a tuba. It certainly has the pitches that he's playing, but it doesn't have the roundness that we would expect. So let me bring up the tree. Now, you could just say that's a bit of reverb, but it's not. It is the room reacting to the tuba. And I'm going to prove that by adding a bit of random hall, similar delay time. And so let's just actually do that. So basically what I'm hearing is you're just getting a top-end tail, but you're not getting any of that roundness. Now, I think what's happening is when you're in a room that's big enough, the tuba is creating standing waves that vibrate the room, so the room becomes like a body of a guitar, which is why you could probably record a piccolo dry and put a bit of reverb on, and all you'll get is that kind of high tail, because that's all a room would do. If you wanted a piccolo to kind of reverberate a room, you'd probably have to stick him in a room this size. So let's quickly compare the two. The reverb, pull that down, and the actual room. Completely different. And I guess the moral of this story is if you are overdubbing or underdubbing stuff that's high up and dry, you'll probably find that easier to mix in with your orchestral stuff. I think the deeper you get, the more difficulty you'll have in creating that amazing kind of body that you get recording stuff in a really great room. Anyway, thanks for watching as always. If you like what I do, hit like. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe. And for any kind of related content, I tend to put links in the video description box below.